Hello, everyone, and welcome to the GitLab 12.0 live stream. My name is John Jeremiah, and I'm going to be hosting today's live stream while we share and celebrate some of the accomplishments of our journey of building GitLab and moving from 11.0 to 12.0. Today's live stream is going to consist of a couple of different segments. We're going to share a little bit upon the journey of what it's taken to go from 11.0 to 12.0. We want to talk a lot about our community and the community that's helped to contribute to make GitLab what it is. We'll have a panel discussion. We'll talk about why is security and operations so important to the DevOps lifecycle. We'll spend a little time talking with the customer, and to close it all up, Sid is going to share some time and give some insight in an AMA. So if you have questions, please post the questions into the YouTube chat and share your questions, and we'll have questions for Sid at the end of the session. So let's dive in. The journey from 12.0 has consisted of a number of key releases where we have gone from auto DevOps to building out capabilities supporting security and operations all in a single application to support the entire DevOps lifecycle. The journey has been fantastic. We've had over 400 different features and improvements shipped over the last year. In addition to that, we've seen massive growth of DevOps on GitLab.com, where we had over 1 million monthly merge requests last month. Absolutely amazing growth. And the growth is not just of people adopting and using GitLab, but our team is growing as well. As I look back from last year to today, we have over 400 new team members who are part of the team helping to build and make GitLab awesome. We're not doing it ourselves. It's a community that's making it happen. There's been over 2,000 community contributions over the last year, and it continues to grow based upon the community offering input and insight and helping to make GitLab even better. It's not just that. It's about developers and security and operations all coming together. And that's the theme that we're talking about with 12.0. We see 12.0 in the future as how does DevSecOps come together? And when we made our announcement with the release post, we talked about specific capabilities, and that's the purpose of today's live stream, is to double click into it and talk about where we're going and what we're doing. But before we do that, I want to ask Emily to share some insight about the community and how the community has contributed to where we're going. So to that, Emily Cook, our Senior Community Advocate. Emily, I turn it over to you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Emily Cook. I'm the Senior Community Advocate at GitLab. Our goal on the community relations team is to ensure everyone is heard and feels welcome into our community. I joined just before 11.5, and in the 7 months that I've been here, I've definitely noticed very impressive growth and engagement. So next slide, Jen. Thank you. So for our wider community contributions, GitLab has been open source since day one, and we've always had a lot of wider community members who've helped improve GitLab. When the co-contributor program was started, one of our main goals was to lower the barrier to entry for new contributors and to develop a closer sense of community among our contributors. We were able to highlight ways to make contributions easier and to bring people together through contributor blog posts, our monthly core team meetings, and our quarterly hackathons. To look at the metrics between 11.0 and 12.0, you'll see that we have more than 600 wider community contributors and had over 2,000 MRs merged. Also, wider community members made contributions to more than 15 GitLab projects, including CE, EE, our runner, our omnibus, and our shell projects. So, yep, next slide. Okay, so for our community growth, we've had a great global community, but we thought there was an opportunity to provide them with better support. So since 11.6, our focus has been on improving our support for meetup organizers. So far, we have reactivated groups in the Bay Area and Australia, and we've launched new groups in Nigeria, Germany, India, and some in North and South America. We're especially proud of our flagship community in Tokyo, led by one of our core team members, who continues to exceed our expectations. We want to send a special thank you to our meetup community in Hamburg, who are streaming this together right now, and all of our other meetup groups who will be gathering to watch this recording at a release party in the coming weeks. Since 11.0, we've supported more than 160 meetups as speakers, organizers, or sponsors. Our meetup community has grown to more than 3,500 members. It's been a lot of fun to watch the community grow, and we have plans to continue to improve our support for meetup groups and help them become even more successful. So an example of this is our Heroes program, which will help better engage, support, and thank members of the wider GitLab community who serve as advocates of GitLab in tech communities around the globe. We're still putting on the final touches to that, but we expect to launch it in mid-July. So more to come in the months following. Okay, next slide. So we now have 10 official core team members, including Sid. The GitLab core team primarily consists of volunteers that have made significant contributions to GitLab, whose mission is to represent the wider GitLab community and ensure that everyone can contribute. So next we have a GitLab Connect, which is a regional hosted event that brings together customers and prospects to share stories and lessons learned about GitLab. In 2019, we held 9 Connect events with over 400 in attendance, and we have a dozen more planned for the remainder of the year. We also hold monthly community advisory board meetings virtually. We now have 28 CAB members, and we had our first in-person meeting in April in New York City, and we have our next one planned in October in Seattle. Okay, so next slide. So every release, the GitLab team members select a wider community member as an MVP, and you can see them listed at that top link. We have an MVP contributor who is just hired into the company, actually, Marcel. So we'd like to take this time to thank everyone who's helped get us to where we are today. So you'll see there on the slide, that's everyone who's been a MVP contributor since the 11.0 release. So just take a second. Thanks contributors. Okay, so next slide. So we'd like you to join us with our community. Without our community, GitLab would not be where it is today. Our company and product may be growing, but as one of our core team members has said, it's never been easier to contribute. On this page, which should be shared in YouTube in the description, you'll find some links to help you get started if you're considering contributing to GitLab. We try to make the barrier to entry as low as possible because we really understand that an open, welcoming community is vital to the success of the open source software model. So thank you, everyone. That's it for the community. So
awesome, Emily. Thank you so very much. I think it's amazing what the community has done together, and the work that you and the team do to bring people together is amazing. It's powerful as we grow together. Thank you so much. So let's pivot. I'd like to talk a little bit and share and bring Mark and Kenny and Kathy on. Mark leads our product strategy. Kenny is responsible for our products around operations products. And Kathy leads our security efforts here at GitLab to ensure that we have solid and robust information security. So to kick it off, I'd like to throw a question, perhaps Mark, to you, to ask you about your perspective of the vision and strategy for us and how we're including in both security and operations into GitLab. Mark?
Sure, thanks, John. Yeah, we started off really focused on developers with version control for your code and issue tracking. And a while back, we added CI, or continuous integration and testing, and it really opened up a large door to increasing the scope of the workflows that we handled. Then we went further and actually started focusing on how to help developers go faster from idea to production. But we didn't stop at production. We then added configuration and monitoring of your production apps. And with that, we really entered the world of DevOps. Now, we actually went a little bit further than just DevOps. We added security, but we don't call it DevSecOps usually. We just call it DevOps. But in the beginning, this was all still centered around the developer, really how the developer did operations, how the developer looked at security. With 12.0, it's a huge milestone in our transition to not just doing DevSec and Ops for developers, but serving operations people and security people with dashboards and workflows customized around getting those jobs done. And that's really a huge part of our broader mission. Our vision, our mission is to have everyone contribute. There's tons of people involved in software development and delivery, and we want to support all of these people in their journey of collaborating together.
Thank you, Mark. I think that it's amazing. Kenny, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, Mark, yeah, I agree. And I think, part of our vision of everyone can contribute, we start thinking about, typically the developer DevOps lifecycle is really about creating new features and responding to the features that a customer might want. So building the kind of like feature capabilities of an application. But I like to think about how you can consider other capabilities of an application, like its security or its manageability or its resilience in production, as just as critical, and building new DevOps loops for the same thing. We think about adding the design or the kind of user experience of your application, adding that into the DevOps lifecycle. So I think it's really cool how we have this very expansive view that doesn't just stop at the developers and creating and shipping features, but really also shipping and improving and iterating on the capabilities of your application.
Yeah, and I want to also step in and say here that the security team here at GitLab, we are a customer of GitLab's features, and we also dog food and contribute to the product. It's been really exciting to see that empowerment that we're able to provide to developers to make decisions at the time of committing code on whether there's security concerns with what they're trying to commit. I love seeing that kind of thing, because at the end of the day, security teams need to scale. We're never going to have as many security people as we have developers. So we need to empower developers to really be able to make some decisions about security, and also know when to loop in someone on the security team to help them. To that end, yeah, go ahead, Mark.
No, sorry, I was just gonna say, it's really great that when they do loop you in, you can actually still use that same information. I think one of the big challenges with point solutions is, the security team often has a different set of tools to do their audits and everything else, and the developer has a different set of tools, and you're sort of crossing each other's paths and not really talking together. And having a single solution, you may have different views, different dashboards that you use on a daily basis, but when things do escalate, you can point them to the same place.
Yeah, and we do a lot of dog fooding, but right now, frankly, we're more in the contribution mode than dog fooding, and we'd like to ramp up the dog fooding. But if we look at it from both perspectives, they're both useful. For example, for our own compliance requirements that we're looking to do for our frameworks, we have access requests, which we make great use of GitLab issues to implement that and have that audit record for future compliance checks. We also have recently rolled out an escalation engine using also GitLab issues. So in our way, that is our way of dog fooding our own features and our own product to do what we need to do from day to day. One of the other exciting things that we do is that we dog food and contribute to CI runners for abuse operations functions that we have here on the scene.
Yeah, and I love that we dog food here, and I know, Kathy, you've been an awesome contributor to the future direction of our product as a result of that dog fooding. Mark, you'd mentioned that one of the pain points that a single application solves is this pain of kind of integrating in. We typically think of it as like switching context between tools, but there's another also value point that we have the opportunity to provide that we do in many cases today, and that's that we can immediately give you the correct context because we're aware of that information. So it's not just, oh, there's less pain, but it's also super value add to make your teams more efficient, Kathy, because you have access to all this information that you wouldn't have had because your tools were disparate and the data was in siloed locations.
Yeah, that's absolutely right, Kenny. We're very lucky that way.
So that's awesome. I'd like to continue talking about one of the things, Kenny, that you've been working on a lot has been about release management and release orchestration. It's incredibly important for operations teams. How do you see that evolving over the next several releases and into the future?
Yeah, thanks, John. I'll say, I started similar to Emily in the 11.5 release cycle, and so most of this work predates me, and Mark and the rest of the team have a lot to do with our capabilities here. As Mark mentioned, we entered into this CI/CD world many years ago, and today it's astounding, but customers talk about how they love the RCI capabilities. It's a great place for me as a product manager to come and talk to customers and have them use words literally like love to talk about these capabilities. But like everything at GitLab, we don't stop there. We're always moving forward and always progressively iterating. And so for us, we take the capabilities that we have today around being able to define your pipeline in code as what we call GitLab CI.yaml file. We've started presenting those in dashboards, and John, I think you have a slide to show the dashboards, but the dashboards are meant to give you a view across multiple projects of the current pipeline status, so you can tell where things are red and where things aren't and what the latest commit was. Super helpful for teams. You can drill into those specific applications to learn more also about the environments and the kind of status and metrics of those environments. These are really, as Mark pointed out, about giving operations teams kind of first-class status, not just considering the developer persona. But we really want to take that further. And for us, the mantra of DevOps is really about shipping fast and shipping quickly. And so we have enabled some cool capabilities to get into what we call progressive delivery. So continuous, very continuous delivery, but also as you roll out, kind of having the canary type rollout. In progressive rollout, we're actually talking about specifically incremental percentage-based rollouts of your feature flags. That feature is actually coming in 12.1. It's already scheduled and underway. But our kind of secondary goal is really more about that operations persona. And actually, Kathy is a core constituent here about compliance. So as you can define your pipeline in code, you also want to be able to ensure that all the projects across your instance are conforming to some compliance standards. And that can both mean that a certain set of checks and approvals happen before release, and it can also mean that you're able to gather appropriate artifacts to report back to auditors. And so we think of our next steps around really enabling progressive delivery and leaning into compliance as code so that we can deliver kind of out-of-the-box compliance for teams that require it as imperative, all while, remember, keeping in mind that the number one thing we don't want to do is add more friction to the process. So it has to be easy so you can continue to ship faster. So those are some of the things that we're working on in the CI/CD world.
Very cool. What about security? One of the things we're also working on, Kenny, is baking security into merge requests to give teams fast feedback. Can you talk a little more about where we're heading from a security perspective as how you see the vision?
Yeah, in the tool itself, we have, and this is a testament to the team and the team's spirit of iteration during the course of the 11.0 release series. We added a whole suite of security scanners: SAST, DAST, dependency scanning, container scanning, secret detection, all as part of GitLab. That then we took this very shift left approach that you get that scan as a result of a pipeline, so you get it on every commit. So as a developer, every time you make a commit, you get the results of these security scans. So you see it, very quickly before the code is even merged. That's really about enabling, as Kathy mentioned, the developers to be more self-service on the security scanning and the security teams to only be alerted when it's critical. And we alert the security teams via dashboards. We create dashboards that show the overall vulnerabilities, the recent pipelines, the trends in those vulnerabilities, so that in the future teams can highlight, here's maybe some developers that need some review of their security best practices, or here's the trend lines for whether or not we're adding new vulnerabilities to an application or not. But we don't want to just stop there. We want to continue to add more robustness in the workflows that Mark and Kathy mentioned around if there needs to be some approval of vulnerability and who can dismiss vulnerabilities within a merge request. But then also, I was recently talking to a heavy GitLab secure user who was mentioning that we have this ability to move beyond just running our security scans on a merge request basis, but also running them kind of continuously on the project or on the repository, because it's important that especially as a security professional, that they can answer the question of, oh, there's a new vulnerability that was announced today. Which one of my applications are impacted by this vulnerability? And we'd really love to enable that. That's where we're working towards in the future, is this kind of what we call software composition analysis, but that happens outside of the merge request, that happens across multiple projects for a CISO type user persona.
Yeah, and I think that's really important. And what I want to emphasize is that I'm not sure if everyone realizes, but it is much more expensive to fix a security vulnerability after the fact than get in early on that process and make sure that due diligence is taken at the beginning. So not only is there that, but there's that self-service portion of allowing developers to help themselves, which in the end also adds more awareness to security culture at a company. So I think that is all really good.
Awesome. So Kathy, as a security executive and a leader here at GitLab, you're involved in helping to shape our direction, our vision as to where we go as a company, and building that out. How do you see the future of the intersection of DevOps and information security or application security? Where do you see that headed?
So, increasingly more and more companies are becoming cloud native focused and they're moving towards trying to do more agile security. And that's got to be empowered and enabled by the right tools and capabilities as well. You can't really tell a legacy environment that you got to be agile tomorrow and not provide them with the right application or tools to use. So this is all part of it. The other part is that increasingly companies are becoming more and more remote, and there's more global and more remote workforces. So given all that, there has to be a lot of care in how applications are being accessed remotely and how credentials are being managed. Because you can no longer set a perimeter and monitor an environment that is going to be a given. People move from one environment to another, but they still need their access. So security is very important to get right, that user experience factor. You want to be able to empower people and let them scale and still ship products. You don't want security to be a blocker, because when that happens and you add too much friction, people go around that and they do something else, which defeats the whole purpose of security.
Yeah, Kathy, that point that you just made is super important, and I'd love to just get your direct perspective. I think, we talk about how these the industry has a wide set of tools that people use for security scanning, but oftentimes it becomes a little bit of shelfware because people find that there's too much friction and they just go completely around it. And so I'd love to get some more of your thoughts around just the value of knowing that it's used and knowing that by being frictionless, you might get significantly more coverage than you would within your teams of developers.
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, let me just clarify that frictionless is not going to be possible with security, right? We try to make it as frictionless as possible, but it's never going to be 100% frictionless because you're always adding a new step to the process. That said, there's a lot that we can do to really make sure people feel that this is a usable solution for them. And part of our dogfooding, the security team's dogfooding of GitLab's features, is to make sure that this is usable for us. And if it's not usable for us, then we work with PMs and we work with developers to figure out how this can be more usable. So that's a very important feedback loop that many products have not quite incorporated, that we want to do here and also do better than we're currently doing. So that's all very important.
Very cool. So question, Kenny, thank you, Kathy. And one of the questions I think that also has come up as well has been a question about where we're going from. We've added incident management capabilities to GitLab as something that we're building in. How do you see that evolving, and how will it affect both operations and security together?
Yeah, it's a great question. Thanks, John. I'll say, the current state of the industry, in my opinion, is that there are still a lot of disparate tools in that end stage of the DevOps lifecycle. And that means we really don't have a lot of great best practices for driving feedback from those end stages back around the loop to the kind of plan stage. And I think there's a real opportunity that, frankly, GitLab is well positioned for, because you can complete that loop by having things in code, right? If you have your pipeline in code, the way you do monitoring in code, your configuration, we've talked a lot about trends around infrastructure as code. it enables you to quickly realize things that, again, aren't about features or about other capabilities. The performance of your application is slow and users are being impacted, or the business metrics that you rely on as a kind of SLO is degraded for some reason. You can drive that improvement you get all the context in an incident, and then you can drive that improvement via a merge request as a change and as an iteration. And so I think, our completion of having incident management enables that for our users. It enables small DevOps teams to have a really sharp iteration cycle that isn't just about, oh, a user has a feature request. It's also about other capabilities. And that one of those capabilities, really important, is security, right? I have found a security vulnerability in in the production operations of my application. I can then immediately recognize that and create an incident and drive that back. And so I think it's really important that we are well positioned to take advantage of closing this DevOps loop, and really it has to do with, again, those potentially non-feature capabilities of an application.
Yeah, and Kenny, I really like the point that you made about SLOs and incidents. In security, we're very operational. So when there's a security vulnerability or an incident, we need to really take care that we scale our ability to escalate an incident if it hasn't been resolved within an SLA expectation. So to that end, my team has been dogfooding and contributing an escalation engine recently, which I mentioned earlier. But to get into it a little bit more, the escalation engine helped to drive more accountability and ownership across all of the GitLab issues that are related to incident response and also to SLAs of fixing security vulnerabilities. It's very hard for us to manually chase down what needs to happen next in an issue. But with automation and escalation, we do that so much more effectively. And so we're very excited about contributing what we learned from dogfooding this process and everything to making it part of a future GitLab feature.
Yeah, and I'll just say, it's something unique to GitLab in my experience that we have this great dogfooding culture of not just, hey, there's like a forced, you have to use this tool, but also that the teams are, because everyone can contribute here at GitLab, the teams are fully capable of adding stuff back into the product and building onto the product in teams that are, like outside of your traditional product team. I love that about GitLab. We have this very expansive mindset, not just within our own teams, but also community members end up contributing. And kudos to our large community who's helped in a number of different ways.
Yeah, a good example of that in this release was GitLab Insights. Mac and the quality team, they built insights so they could track how they're doing from a testing and defect perspective. And now it's shipped as part of 12.0, which is an exact example of that. Mark, one of the things I want to share something, go back to the slides quickly. One of the things that you did and the team did recently was you published the category maturity page. And I've got 2 slides of this. I'd like to understand, as you look at the stage maturities and how we're looking at, what are your priorities for the team and where we're going as you look at going forward? And by the way, I absolutely love this maturity page. It's so powerful and it's so awesome. Thank you for doing that.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, it actually turns out to be really, really helpful for people to understand where we're at. And I don't know if you can scroll down, but if you look at that page yourself at some point, below that, it also gives the plan for how we're going to evolve all of those categories. So not just where we're at, but where we're going. And then, so the thing we just recently introduced is sort of not just talking about the categories, the features and how they're going to mature, but how the stage itself matures. And so we've come up with this sort of 7-point scale of describing how a stage kind of matures. Well, really step 0 is nothing exists at all, but then it starts with usually we'll create something in the stage and we'll use it internally. Then at some point, a few more users will use it. Then it becomes good enough that you can actually switch away from some other tool to using that stage. And then eventually all the way to the best product in that category at stage 7. And so it's really great to communicate that and just to be upfront and transparent about where we're at with each of these things. We're not at the same place with all of these stages. In fact, so create and verify our 2 oldest stages, been around since 2011. And they're really strong and really mature. Create is really source code management, or version control, and Verify is where CI lives. And so those are really mature. Going forward, the next really big stage that we see, and thus we're prioritizing, is release. And that's with a big focus on CD, so being able to continuously deploy to production, to Kubernetes or wherever it is you put production. And then also the release orchestration and management that Kenny talked about earlier. Release is not only really important just for our customers generally, but it also really opens up a lot of the rest of the DevOps lifecycle. Once you are deploying with GitLab to production, well, then it's a lot easier to monitor and configure your production applications. And so that's kind of it really just opens up the rest. It's kind of a barrier sometimes. If you haven't done deployments there, it's harder to do the monitoring. But then conversely, once you do that and you open it all up, now you've really got this single application that goes way beyond just CI into your full operation side. And so that's a big focus for us. Beyond that, the next two big priorities are plan with project management. We've got a lot of great features there, but we really want to continue to invest, especially on sort of the Kanban side, the Kanban issue boards that we call them. And then secure for application security testing, obviously a big topic today. That's a big priority for us over the next little while.
Yeah, and thank you, Mark. I totally agree. Like, I'm super excited about this stuff that comes as we mature these categories. I do want to make the meta point. John mentioned this, but I'm really proud to be a GitLabber on so many fronts. But the fact that we are so transparent with where our product stands and its maturity is just kind of a breath of fresh air. We've all encountered products where they claim to do everything under the sun or are better than sliced bread. But I love that we're transparent. We're honest with ourselves. We are always strive to be our best critic. And this page and the fact that we're open and public with where we are with our different maturities is just super inspiring to me. So.
Yeah, we've had the roadmap transparent and public for a long time. The homepage, maybe not a long time, but for quite a while, it listed like, here's where we're going. These are the categories. It's only recently that we've then been so transparent with the maturity and saying, okay, yes, we've got these, but even these other ones that we have already, yeah, they're still in really early stages. And now from our homepage, there is a link to look at the category maturities right from there. And so everybody can see it. It's a great page. I do encourage anybody to take a look at that because it also really highlights what our plan is. Like you can see what we're focusing on for the next 12 months.
Yeah, this is great. Personally, I can share that I used to do a ton of technical product evaluations for security products in particular. And it's always very hard for me as an evaluator to look at a product's page and get a sense of where they are in maturity, or even if they deliver what they promise, right? So this is really, really refreshing for me to see. I've never seen anything like this in all the product evals I've done.
It is awesome. And that's all I'm going to say with it. But one last question, I'd like to hear your thoughts on this. We're different because of the way we're open core with a community that's making contributions to GitLab. How does that influence and shape the priorities that you have as you lead the product side of the team?
I'll share my first one. One of the first things I noticed when I joined was I was interacting on issues with all sorts of people, and I never even stopped to question whether that was a GitLab team member or a customer or a contributor, or it doesn't occur to you. And the fact that we operate so transparently, and in conjunction with our open community is really this great kind of cycle that feeds on itself, because we continue to be transparent. It makes the community more aware of what we're doing and where we're headed. They can react and respond and also contribute to that direction. So it's really empowering to me as a product manager to have both an active community that we're a part of, as well as have in terms of contributions, but also as the sounding board, as a stakeholder in where we're headed.
Fantastic. I agree. It's one of the things that I think makes us special. And it's about how we are in this together. It's not us and them, it's all of us together. And so with that, I'm going to move forward. Thank you all so very much for your inputs and for your sharing. Also, as a reminder to everyone on the live stream, after my next conversation, we have questions with Sid. So please post your questions, since Sid will share his insight. But I'd like to move forward and introduce Russell Levy. Russell is a co-founder and CTO of Chorus, and he's a GitLab user. And I wanted to ask Russell a few questions about how he's using GitLab and what they're doing. Russell, could you maybe share a little bit about Chorus? Introduce Chorus to those of us who don't know Chorus. I'm going to go back to no sharing screen too, so we can see you.
Great. Yeah. So I'm Russell. I'll just give you a very quick background on Chorus. I want to make sure people have. I don't want to drone on here. So Chorus is a conversation intelligence platform. It records, transcribes, and analyzes customer conversations. It helps sales teams and support teams increase win rates and coach reps much more effectively. And we have live transcription and AI-based analytics. And with that, Chorus is able to tell you why you win more deals, or why your team wins more deals, and why some reps are more than 100% on their quota. You could also use Chorus to share call moments internally and externally to get the company aligned to shorten a deal cycle. I know GitLab uses this extensively internally. That's what we're told. And we also provide AI curated playlists that automatically build playlists of the best moments for you to use as a coaching tool.
So thank you, and I agree. I think I find Chorus to be incredibly powerful, and it helps us to learn. We learn more from listening to calls and listening to these. It's just amazing. So tell me a little bit about your development delivery practices and processes. How do you go about building Chorus?
We're using an agile methodology, like any startup claims to. Do we do it well? Probably not, but we try to. So what do? We have we have sprints, and we start off with a sprint. We have our sprint planning at the beginning. We create our epics in GitLab. After we have epics that the product team creates, they're going to be broken down by the engineering team before the sprint starts. And then we're basically using GitLab for the whole development cycle through the release. So it means that we have the issues that are in GitLab. We're using it for capacity planning. I know you guys have a few features we're still waiting for on capacity planning. I see it on the roadmap. We sit there waiting. Is it going to be 12.3 yet or not? And we go through capacity planning, and then the team just works on the issues. We're using GitLab CI. We're using it for CD as well. We're not using all your features yet, but there's plans to do that over the next few months as well, to be able to use it for canary deployment.
Thanks, Russell. And I know that internally we have teams waiting on the capacity planning feature as well. They're looking forward to using it. So you're not alone. I know it's coming soon. Using GitLab at Chorus, how has it brought together? Has it helped you to bring together operations and security and developers to have a common view and to eliminate the friction between the teams?
Yeah, completely. I mean, just given we give access internally to everything to everybody in the organization. So everybody's able to see when there's merge requests coming in, when there's features that may need to be flagged for security. We have a few components that we both there's a few components contractually, if they're ever changed, that it has to go through an extensive security review. We have a few other components. Remember, we're recording all these conversations. Some of it has personal information on it. If we do anything, we have some features that scrub personal information. If we make any changes to that, it just has to make sure that it works well. From the security point of view, we have that visibility. We're using the security dashboard. We just started to use it a month ago to be able to see if there's new security issues that are coming up. And it really helps the developers just to say, why is this issue that I'm claiming is a security issue really a problem? Just pointing to the bandit, pointing to the external sources through the bandit code of why this is an issue, how you would exploit it, how this could be a problem. It just creates the feedback loops are so much shorter, being able to have all this in one tool and not having to go to 17 different sources.
That's awesome. So as a customer, and from your perspective, as you look at GitLab, you've been with GitLab for a while. What's your perspective of how the community comes together to help GitLab become GitLab?
I love the GitLab community. I've been using GitLab, I think, even before Chorus. So we started Chorus around 4 years ago in 2015. I think I started using, I can't remember the year I started to use it for a previous startup I was at. Usually it was 2013, 2014. I don't think GitLab was a company yet. It was just an open source project that Sid had started. We had started on 8. It was on 8 point something when we started at Chorus on GitLab. It was from the beginning. We've been using GitLab the whole time. And I personally haven't made any contributions to GitLab. I'm personally mostly in C++ and Python. So the Ruby stuff is a completely foreign language to me. But it's just amazing to be able to see the openness that you guys, how you interact with the community. When we have feature requests, we're now like an ultimate customer, so we pay you guys lots of money for it. But even before that we're able to put in feature requests, we're able to comment on stuff, we're able to see the visibility on why you're prioritizing different features, and be able to say maybe this isn't, this is something you should be putting a higher priority on. Maybe this doesn't fit your priorities for how you define different tiers. It's amazing to see the feedback when something's premium and you see the community members saying, maybe this shouldn't be in your premium category. And it goes back down to community because you guys realize the community is right. It's unbelievable. Or even when the community develops features that you were planning on putting in premium, but because the community developed it, of course, it's going to be a community feature. And I love seeing that. And just that interaction is amazing to see.
It's one of the things that makes it exciting to be here and part of the community, frankly. So a question for you about improvements. How have you seen, has GitLab helped improve velocity for you at Chorus? So how has it improved your development processes?
So over the past year or so, we used to measure velocity very, very carefully. And it was always really hard to improve velocity because you try to do something and velocity is really the output of many other metrics. So we've moved over to, I can't even remember the name of the book, but there's one book that gave 4 metrics that we should be measuring. One of them was change failure rate, mean time to recovery. Those are 2 of them, MTTR and CFR. Another one is the size of each change. I'm trying to remember the acronym for it, but how big is each merge request, or how big is each push to production? And the last one is the lead time, how long from the time you start developing a feature until it's on production. And those are what we've been measuring. And we've started to measure this using GitLab. You have a feature, cycle analytics. We actually built that stuff internally instead of using your cycle analytics, just so we could get the metrics exactly the way we want, so no one could say that it's not true. We have all the metrics being calculated internally. And GitLab has really, really, really helped us move those numbers. Being able to have the merge request, having our test results sitting in the merge request, to be able to see what failed, what didn't fail, the security review, the performance, the performance test, the code climate, everything there just on the merge request. It's amazing what you guys have done with Auto DevOps with just a few lines in our GitLab CI file. And it's really helped us be able to shorten the lead time, which has really affected every single one of those other metrics. It means that we're having more pushes to production. We're having smaller pushes to production. We have more of them. We're having fewer failures in production because we have ways to test the application. We're just starting. I was waiting for you guys to release 12.0 because we're going to be doing the visual, what's it called again? The visual reviews.
Visual reviews, yeah.
Visual reviews. That feature, like we're building, like we have a sprint starting next week. That's one of the top features on the sprint, to get that in there. Just to be able to close this cycle, to be able to get things done before it gets to production and to do it very fast. GitLab has really, really helped us with that.
Awesome, Russell. Thank you so much. Any other closing comments? I love your stories and I love where you're at. And I will certainly circle back with you. I want to learn more about the cycle analytics work that you're doing. Any other thoughts?
No, everything's great. Thank you.
Awesome. Russell, thank you so much for spending some time in your afternoon to join us. I love hearing your stories about what people are doing and the stories from people in the front lines of actually building and doing software and using GitLab is really, it motivates me so much more with what we do. Thank you so much. So with that, Emily is going to help us facilitate our next stop in this live stream. Is we have time set aside for AMA with Sid. Emily and Sid, are you there?
Yeah.
Emily, I think you see questions coming in yet, and I'll turn it over to you.
Sure. Hello, everyone, again. Okay, so our first question for Sid, are there plans to make GitLab more social?
Yes and no. So if you're talking about are we going to go hands-on, compete with GitHub, try to move everyone over? Probably not today. More social. I would love a better explore page in GitLab. I think that one is not looking as good as it should be. We're open to ways to make it more social. We got some companies using GitLab at over 10,000 people. They wanted to be more social. We got Debian and KDE using GitLab. They wanted to be more social. So we're definitely open to changes and fixes there. One thing we've been discussing today is maybe make it more social where there's a way to message the company directly from GitLab. So use a technology like, for example, Sendbird to make it easier to chat with people inside the company and open up a communication channel that way. So those are a few of the social changes we're discussing.
All right. Thank you, Sid. Okay, so next question. What is dog fooding and why is it so important for GitLab to dog food its own product?
Yeah, so dog fooding means using what you produced yourself. It is extremely important in order to make sure that we make sure it's usable. Like if something is so bad, we're not even using it ourselves, that is a sign that it's not usable by anybody else. And we've seen again and again that until we use it ourselves, there's just scores of bugs that we should be able to prevent. We've seen that when we use GitLab CEO to transfer GitLab from Azure to GCP. I think we found 20, maybe even 40 different bugs that we solved. And that way our customers don't have to find that. We saw it again when we're now using Elasticsearch ourselves. We found probably 7, maybe even 10 bugs, huge performance problems that were there that we only solve now. And we're seeing it with products that we don't use. For example, we don't use our own monitoring. We use something, we use Grafana, which is awesome. But because we're not using our own metrics, that product hasn't matured as well as it should. And I knew of very few customers that are using that. That's because we haven't kind of taken away all the bugs that we should have ourselves. So we're getting all the teams in GitLab to recognize that, look, we have to use it ourselves. And that doesn't mean an API integration. That doesn't mean a bot integration. That means actually having it in the product as we ship it to customers, using that exact same way, using the defaults in GitLab. If it's not usable for us, then it's probably not going to be useful for other people. So that's a very high priority, making sure that all our teams in the company know we have to use GitLab as it is out of the box. And that will make sure that we run into the bugs and we start improving GitLab ourselves. And we're aligned with the rest of the community, because we've seen if we're not doing that, we're not making progress as fast as we should.
All right, thank you. So next question. As we see more data in GitLab, charts and dashboards are improving. When might Meltano integration help move from reactive to predictive and proactive analysis?
Yeah, for now, all the analytics in GitLab, like cycle analytics and DevOps scores and insights and contributing metrics, those are things we make outside of Meltano. In GitLab, we use something called eCharts to make them. We have no plans to integrate Meltano with GitLab at this moment. Meltano is a separate product for the data lifecycle, mostly used for getting all the way from an API to a dashboard. It's written in Python, and it's aimed at a different audience. So no plans to integrate for now. Predictive analytics, I think, are going to be a huge part of GitLab. I think there's a lot that kind of machine learning can do already. Exciting things to think about are, for example, if you submit code to GitLab, maybe we can already tell you how likely that code is to fail based on like what part of the code base did we change? By who? How long? How much time did they spend on it? Who reviewed it? How long did the review take? How many comments were there, etc. And like probably 10 other factors, we can probably predict how likely that code is to cause an outage. Can also predict labels, like which labels should you probably add. So instead of giving you a list of all labels, give a few suggestions for people, or maybe add the ones you're pretty sure about. There's many more things we can do. We now run all the GitLab tests every time we push a bit of code. It doesn't make sense to run 100,000 tests, literally 100,000 tests, when you change a simple piece of code. GitLab should know which tests to run based on what happens. So lots of ways we can use machine learning and prediction to make GitLab better.
All right, thank you. So next question, why are the security features only for gold users? It would be nice to give access to everyone in the tech world since security is so important.
Yep. There's always a balance between like what do we monetize and what don't we monetize. I think for security, that's actually been a topic yesterday between me and Michael McBride, because one of our promises that is one thing in every stage is open source. And that's not the case for secure. And we can wiggle out of that and say, well, it's not part of the DevOps lifecycle, it's separate. But I think like, I understand that promise to be like every stage that is on our homepage. So we should open source at least one thing there. And we discussed yesterday, and we think the thing most useful to people is dependency scanning. So we're thinking about making that open source. One thing we're still considering is like how to give kind of access to that data. If you have a self-managed GitLab, you still need kind of the data store of like who else, what are the vulnerabilities? So you probably will need to create some kind of an API key, and we're probably gonna kind of collect email addresses and make sure that we have a bit more visibility in what's happening with GitLab downstream, one of the major problems. So it might be a bit of an exchange. Another thing we're getting is that lots of other security tooling providers want to integrate with GitLab. And I think we have to make that easier. So the functionality to kind of upload a report into GitLab with like, these are the vulnerabilities or these are the security problems, and then have that show up in the merge request. I think we got to make sure that's open source as well. So other people can display that in the same way the tools that are shipped with GitLab can do. So I'm thinking about open sourcing that, and that's an active conversation.
All right, so next question. What are your future plans with respect to Kubernetes integrations?
Yeah, thanks for that. So far, the Kubernetes integrations have been a huge success. GitLab is now the most common way to deploy to Kubernetes, but we can always do better. One of the ways we can do better is making it easier to create a cluster. Right now, you can create a cluster on GCP, but we want that for all the other cloud platforms. You can already add any cluster to GitLab, by the way, and we just improved that in 12.0, it automatically checking kind of the credentials. We also want to make sure it's kind of usable however you use Kubernetes. So making sure we set the permissions in the correct way, making sure it's super easy to kind of deploy things like Prometheus to get metrics out of your application. So kind of making it very easy. You just push your code and GitLab does the right thing by default. I think it's going to be a continuing thing. It was pretty cool to see how fast we were able to do serverless. And that's already kind of quite usable. In 30 minutes, you can get set up with serverless on top of Kubernetes using GitLab. We want GitLab to become kind of the default thing you use in conjunction with Kubernetes to do all the busy work for you in order to deploy your apps and scale them and progressively deliver them.
All right, thank you. Next question. Are there any plans for backup and restore strategies for applications?
Oh, that's interesting. So like GitLab has backup and restore for GitLab. It doesn't have backup and restore for applications. And That is a great thought. I think until now, we've relied on kind of managed services to do that. So we assume when you deploy your app with Auto DevOps, that you're for things you want to retain, like a database, that you use something like a cloud service like RDS, or you run your own database. I think we have to get a bit better at that. We're seeing with Kubernetes operators that it's possible more and more to use kind of those operators for the stateful services. We should probably start thinking about that. Mark, you want to add to this by any chance?
I think that covers it well.
Cool. So yeah, interesting. Very open to discussing that, and we look, if you have a contribution, I think that's really interesting in order to do more of that. Also, I think we need better strategies, for example, for testing rollback procedures. I know a lot of companies that want to see a rollback before they even deploy something to production. I think that should be almost like part of our default pipeline. Database changes, backups, and restore testing, things like that. So that's another way to improve our Kubernetes integration.
All right, thank you. So next question. How can someone use GitLab CD to deploy MS Windows applications, clients, and servers running on bare metal or VMs, no containers, Kubernetes? An audience member is using Octopus Deploy and would like to be using GitLab.
Yeah, I think you can already. I think what was in the 12.0 blog post was that we're switching from kind of using CMD, the old command line thing, to PowerShell. So you should be able to kind of script GitLab with PowerShell to do continuous delivery. And we're getting more and more like Windows users. So if there's something we can improve, we'd be glad to hear it. I think the runner now supports Windows environments properly. That took a while, and we're really excited about that.
Great. Okay, so next question. Are there any plans for team performance metrics?
Yes. Most people don't know that there's already team performance metrics in GitLab. So I think it's contributing analytics or contributor analytics, where you can see of your team, like what the activity is per team member. And it's a great way to find out if someone is really stuck on something, because those numbers show up very easily. We want to get better at that. For example, at GitLab, we want to measure like how many merge requests are you doing every month and things like that. And GitLab Insights is a first step in that direction. I think that shipped previous release. Check that out. And I think right now there's a drop down. You can select 2 options. I wouldn't mind if that's like 20 different ways in which you can view productivity, all the way from kind of cycle time to mean time to resolution, average size per merge request, number of merge requests, lead time before you start doing something. I think that's all things that GitLab should give, and we're adding more to that. We're also trying to improve cycle time and the DevOps score, and then we will not rest before we have things like value stream mapping inside GitLab.
All right, thank you. Okay, so this will be the last audience question before we wrap up. Can I have the GitLab install and the runners in the same Kubernetes?
In the same Kubernetes cluster, I think you can. I hope we set them up right by default so that the runners get evicted from the cluster if GitLab is getting affected. But I think that's the case, and I think there's a button in GitLab to deploy the runner. So it's a so-called GitLab managed application. So it should certainly be possible.
If you use the Kubernetes Helm chart, it'll actually, if you use the Helm chart to install GitLab, it will install the runners automatically by default.
Yay.
All right, thank you, everyone. That's going to be it for the audience questions. We're going to wrap it up here. I'll pass it off to John for if you have any closing remarks.
Thank you so much. Sid, any other closing thoughts from you? I want to make sure anything from you before I close?
No, I we're here at the DevOps Summit in London. It's been great hearing everyone using GitLab, and it's great to see, like, a couple of years ago, we did just version control, we added CI, and now people are using GitLab to deploy their applications, and we're getting closer and closer to delivering the full DevOps lifecycle. I'm super excited that we doubled the number of contributions going in the last half year, and it's a project of a wider community, and it's been very exciting to work with people. Very excited to see some companies stepping up and starting to contribute.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Sid. And that wraps up our live stream today. On behalf of the entire team who's joined us, I want to reinforce, we believe everyone can contribute, and that bringing these different teams together, we're better together. As a community, we're better together, building GitLab. And thank you so much for joining us. I look forward to seeing all of you in a future event. Take care.